Okay, excellent. All right, now we're going to do our best to try to maneuver as we go down, as it continues. So let's see how we get on with it. Okay. So just for a reference, this is Safaria, which is an absolutely wonderful resource to be able to learn with. And as you can see from the side, that there's quite a lot of other references, and it doesn't have all Sfarim, but it certainly has quite a lot, which will certainly help us. Now we aren't on 13b or Yugimel Amabeis, but I wanted to first share the Mishnah, and from the Mishnah we'll get into today's daf that we'll be doing together. So we'll follow along and go for it. So ve'ela min halacha she'amra ba'aliyas Chananya ben Chizkiya ben Garon. So these are the laws or the rulings that were discussed in the upper story. An aliyah is an upper story. We know it as a loft or as an attic. And these halachas were things that were taught. Now you would imagine most halachas, most laws would be shared. By the way, if everyone could just mute their themselves, unless they want to interject at the point, to make sure that it's as clear as possible.
You've got to mute it.
Yeah, the mute should be there. Julia, if you are near Cedric, by the way, that's probably what's causing the
sorry, I need to
alarm.
mute it. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah,
just get the kids.
to avoid husbands and wives being close together, so there's an automatic built-in siren that goes off. So
just mute me, Ruby, please.
So
mute you. Yeah.
Anyway, the idea of assuming that all halacha is taught in a bright and shiny Beis HaMedrash is not always like that. Sometimes you have to learn in relatively unusual circumstances, like hiding in a loft or an attic somewhere, or alternatively using Zoom because we're self-isolating. So, even though this happened a 1,000 or 1,500 years ago, we could, of course, make the reference to its relevance to today, in fact, as well. Anyway, Sha'ol Bakro, when they went to visit him, when he was up there, this is the halachas nimnu, this is what they were taught. V'rabo Beis Shammai al Beis Hillel, and they had discussions of which some would outnumber Beis Shammai over Beis Hillel, which is quite unusual. Ushmona asad dvarim gazru bo b'yom. There were more Beis Shammai nicks than Beis Hillel nicks, so they were winning the day. And to seize that opportunity, in the attic of Chananya ben Chizkiya ben Garon, they put down 18 different principles that passed. You can imagine this is kind of like the parliamentary system in which you have the right type of numbers on the day, and they seized the upper hand and they made their way. So that's the 18 things, and there are many, many different halachas and discussions which are brought in them. But we are on 16a today. We're going to start with 15b. And work from there. Some really interesting halachas, some of them slightly more obscure than others, and we will make our way to the bottom of the page and begin from there. On if you're following inside, then it's going to be on Tesvav Amabeis towards the bottom. There is the two dots is the concluding line, so it's Klei Zechuches is where we're going to start from, and let's find it over here as well. Klei Zechuches. So you guys see where it is over here, and that should be fine as well. Okay, so we have, normally when we think about toveling kalim, we discuss now about what kalim, when you buy new utensils from a non-Jew or that were not made by a Jewish person, you need to tovel them. They need to go through the process of tevilas kalim. But actually, the tevila, the toveling of kalim, of vessels that were during the time of the Beis HaMikdash and afterwards, had to do with tuma and tahara, ritual purity and impurity. And therefore, what we're going to be discussing in principle now is not about the actual rules regarding when you have to tovel something after you buy it. We're talking about when you have to tovel something if it's become impure. It's very important to know that the Torah doesn't discuss anything about glass in terms of its halachic status. And if you guys are all paying attention really well and participating, we'll even have a discussion about plastic as well and aluminum as it's relevant in a variety of different cases. But since the Torah doesn't discuss anything about glass, in principle, there's no such thing as ritual impurity when it comes to glass. There is when it comes to something called cheres, which is earthenware, and there's something which applies to mateches, otherwise known as metal. But since there is no principle when it comes to glass, there should be no reason why glass should ever become impure, that you would need to be tovel it. One of the 18 things that Beis Shammai seized upon on that day when they were up in that loft was to make a rabbinical decree that glass as well has issues of ritual impurity and would need to be tovelled and go through the process of tahara, or possibly not, depending on whether whether you're able to actually kasher or mitaher or purify things that become tameh. Sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't, as we're going to see. But as we are discussing, these are one of the 18 things. The Gemara picks up on the point and asks the question: why in the world would they actually make a rule about the glass having to becoming possible to become ritually impure, to become tameh? Why would they do such a thing? So that's where the Gemara picks up. Why did our rabbis establish tuma, impurity, when it comes to glass? What's the reason why it was introduced? After all, it's not something which would normally, in the Torah, be capable of becoming tameh. It's only rabbinical. Now, before we continue on, we're going to need to know a few details about the difference between the types of materials when they become impure and how they become impure. As I said, the two biblical ones are cheres, are earthenware, as well as mateches, which is metal, but they have very different rules. For example, once earthenware becomes impure, however that happens, once it does, you can't put it into a mikvah and allow it to be, and by doing so, it will become pure. The only way it can become pure is by breaking it. A cheres, earthenware, needs to be smashed up, broken down, and once it's broken down, then it turns back to its natural properties, and then if it's rebuilt again afterwards, that is how it becomes tahar. You can't actually tovel and have your earthenware back where it's supposed to be. Mateches, however, when it comes to metal, metal is capable of going through the tahara process of becoming pure. There are other rules as well. When it comes to mateches, metal, if you touch any part of it and you're tameh, then the cheres, then the metal, the mateches, will become impure just by touch. However, when it comes to cheres, when it comes to earthenware, touching the outside of it does not make it tameh. It still remains in the state of tahara. However, if you touch the inside, assuming it has an inside, for example, cheres, a piece of earthenware which is flat, which does not have a clay kibble, which does not have a section in the inside which can be filled with something like a cup or a bowl or maybe a spoon. If it has no clay kibble, nothing that can hold something inside of it, it's not going to become tameh. But once it does, if you touch the inside, it becomes tameh, it becomes impure. Interestingly enough, when it comes to cheres, even if you just dangle something which is tameh, which is impure, inside the area which it can hold something in, it doesn't actually touch anything, just it occupies the ear inside, that alone can make it become impure just by doing it. So different principles between metal and between earthenware, which are necessary to know as we're going forward. You may ask me a question though. Why, Rabbi? Why? Why is it that metal has these functions of how it becomes impure, becomes tameh, and cheres has these principles of how they become tameh? I can give you two answers. The first answer is because the Torah tells you so. These are the halachas, the Moshe Sinai. These are the rules of how it happens. That's just the way it is. However, we're going to see when it comes to understanding the Gemara, it is important to understand the principle. The principle is as follows. Earthenware, especially during the time of the Gemara, and during the time of the Torah, had no intrinsic value. We're talking about clay over here. Clay which comes from the ground, there's plenty of it. It's a bit of mud. It really has no value whatsoever to it. Whereas metal is a precious metal. It's a precious item. It has value in and of itself. And you see that until today. I mean, goodness, I'm not looking at any values for things, but I would assume that today's day and age, precious metals would have quite a high value. They're intrinsically, as a material in and of itself, something with worth. And therefore, if you touch something which intrinsically has worth, it can become tameh automatically. However, when it comes to cheres, when it comes to earthenware, which doesn't have intrinsic worth on its own, only has worth because of what you can do with it, i.e., what it's formed and shaped into, and therefore only when it's shaped into something, and the actual inside, which has a use, that's what can become tameh, because until then, it doesn't have any value. So just an appreciation of understanding the differences between them, and perhaps one of the reasons given for why it might be. Okay, so either way, the Gemara says, why is it that glass, when it comes to glass, they made a ruling, the rabbis made a ruling that would also become tameh as well. Says the Gemara. Because of the fact that it was the starting point in glass is sand. Sand comes from the ground. Since sand comes from the ground, we want to equate, and even though it will finish off looking extremely different than earthenware, it's heated and then blown and turned into glass. Because it starts off in the same way, we want to make sure that the rules of keeping earthenware, cheres, following the rules of tumah and tahara when it comes to it, so too we say the same thing when it comes to glass, since it begins and it starts off in the same way, therefore it will continue that way as well. And this is actually really interesting, something, if you want to go off on a tangent for a second, when it comes to the Yom Narayim, high holy days, one of the things that we say is Adam Yisodo Me'afar. When the Shliach Tzibur, when the Chazan begins to daven, and when it comes to Musaf time, he refers to human beings as Yisodo Me'afar. Our foundations are earth. We say when it comes to a Levaya, we say that Hashem gives, Hashem takes, blessed be the name of Hashem, and we say that man, his roots are from earth, are from the ground. So it's an interesting thing. We are equated, we are compared to this earthenware. And therefore, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the principle is that just like earthenware, you can't have a purification process until you break that piece of earthenware, which is tameh. So too, there is a process during the Yom Narayim, during the days of awe, in which we kind of need to break ourselves. We need to do teshuvah. We need to break down the various parts of ourselves that have gone wrong. You can't just say, I'll put a plaster on it. I could do a bit of a spit shine, and that should be good enough. Actually, we need to have that process of the redemptive process, which comes from really, really introspection and breaking ourselves down. Adam Yisodom Me'afar, man, his foundations are from earth, and therefore we, as human beings, need to go to that process in order that we can purify ourselves. Which is an interesting parallel that we see from what we learned. So therefore, says the Gemara, we have instituted the importance of also making glass to become glass as well, to be capable of becoming tamei, in order that it fits in with cheres, so that people don't make a mistake between earthenware and glass. Elamayata, if that's true, says the Gemara. Lo tehei lahen tahara b'mikvah. If that's really, really true, then didn't we say when it comes to earthenware, it can't be purified? You can't purify earthenware. You have to smash the thing to bits, and only by smashing it to bits is it able to become purified. Alama tanam. But why did we therefore learn in the Mishnah be'elachot simbekelin? And these are the things when it comes to certain types of vessels, such as glass, where you have a chatzitza. A chatzitza is a separation. When you go into the mikvah, you're not able to go into the mikvah if there are separating items which stop you from touching the water. If glass goes into the mikvah and it has certain types of things which are blocking bits of it from hitting the water, it won't work. And what are the things which are considered to be chotzeitz that separate? Hazefes v'hamor, things like pitch and myrrh. I have no idea what myrrh is, but I'm assuming it's a sticky type of stuff, which gets in the way. That's how Rashi anyway learns it. Rashi learns that these types of things are sticky, and therefore we get in the way of a glass vessel and interfere with the water going onto it. The Ritva takes a slightly different view and says it's not, lots of things get in the way. It's more that it depends on whether you're makpid, whether you care about the fact that it's there, and things which you care that are there are considered a chatzitza when it comes to mikvah. This applies, of course, when women are immersing in the mikveh as well for tahara purposes. Even today, you need to do something called chafifa, which is about taking away all the things which can be a chatzitza, a separation, and the rules of what's considered separation. If obviously you're not supposed to have any separation, but if there is things there that you are makbid on, that you are particular about, they're much worse. So Ritva has to do with the fact that you're makbid. The Rashi has to do with the fact that it just stuck there, and therefore whether you're makbid or not, that's a machlokas Rashi and Ritva, and not for our discussion right now. But either way, we see from here that you could put glass into a mikvah. And since you could put glass into a mikvah, how are we able to how can we say that we are comparing earthenware and glass together, and therefore glass becomes tamei, just like earthenware, it becomes tamei? But we see the process of tahara when it comes to glass is very different. So it's unlikely that we're actually comparing that glass becomes tamei in the first place because of cheres, because of earthenware. Otherwise, we'd have to follow the same rules when it comes to doing the tahara. By the way, if anyone has any questions or anything that they want to interject at any point in time, please feel free. This is on Zoom, in order that anyone can offer any contributions whatsoever. So please feel free to do so in the process. Okay, so says the Gemara in answer. Gemara says, what are we talking about over here? Why is it that when it comes to the specific case that those items were able to be put into the mikvah, and we have to worry about what's considered to be a chatzitza? Says the Gemara, the reason why we had to discuss that, we're talking about the case where glass had a hole in it, and if you have a glass cup with a hole in it, what are you supposed to do? So back then, maybe they still do it today, I have no idea, they put some molten lead and dripped it onto the cavity, and by dripping it onto the cavity, it filled the hole and sealed it, and was able to therefore go on. I guess they didn't have super glue or all those other adhesives that we use now in order to repair glass work. I don't know, maybe they could have called out the fix-it screens that you use for windshields. I don't know. But either way, the reason why you were able to put into the mikvah is, first of all, it had a hole in it, and once there was a hole in it, then they put some lead in, and therefore was able to follow the principles of mateches, of metal, in order for the tahara purpose. However, with regular glass, like cheres, like earthenware, you would not be able to. For Meir he, and this follows from Meir. The Amar, the Meir says, Hakol holech achar hamaimid. Everything goes after the maimid. everything goes after that which is holding it together, or the facilitator, that which is able to make something whole and work. The Omar, the Tanya, as we learned in the Brisa, as we learned in the Brisa, if you have glass which has a hole in it, and it's filled with lead, Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says, Reb Meir mitame v'cham matarim. Reb Meir says it's tame, and the Chachamim say it's tahar because of the fact that it is using lead, and therefore, because we're using lead, it would follow the rules of metal, and it would become tame. And the Chachamim say it's tahar. Now, just to understand this, you need one more piece of information as well. So, what happens when you take metal, for example? You know how we said that cheres, earthenware, once you smash it to bits, it's tameh, you smash it to bits, and then you're able to rebuild it and it becomes whole again. Can you do the same thing with metal? Let's say you don't have a mikvah available. Today we're talking about, we're in times where mikvahs are being closed. Can you still use a mikvah? Can you not still use a mikvah? Can you use a keli mikvah? Can you not use a keli mikvah? Because we want to avoid the spread of the coronavirus. As it happens, when it comes to our keli mikvah, what we're in the process of doing is emptying it and putting a deep clean. And then when it rains again and it fills up, we'll be able to use it again using certain obvious precautions as well. Whereas other keli mikvahs in Golders Green and Edgeware are probably closing down because they're not able to be supervised as much as they are able to be supervised over here. That's an aside. But let's say you don't have a mikvah available for whatever reason, and you have a piece of metal which has become tameh. And remember, tameh was a really big deal back then. If someone was tameh, it needed to become purified, otherwise you couldn't use it. You run the risk of truma coming in touch with it. Really big problems. So, simple solution: take your piece of metal, your metal spoon, melt it down. When I say simple solution, as an alternative solution, melt it down and then reform it again, and then Bob's your uncle. You've done the same process. You've reformed it. No. On that, it doesn't work, because the rule is, and this is a rabbinical decree, but the rule is that if you have a tamei metal object which you then melt down and then reform, it goes back to its original state of impurity. It needs a mikvah. And therefore, Reb Meir says that this piece of glass is going to be impure because it follows the principles of going after the metal, which is the ma'amid, the facilitator which holds it together. And therefore, the glass will follow the metal and become tamei, even if it is until it goes into the mikvah. The Chachamim, on the other hand, take a different view, and they say it's going to be fine. They don't go after the ma'amid, and our Gemara would say that goes after the ma'amid, and therefore, when it comes to normal glass, it follows the principles of earthenware, and therefore it cannot go to mikvah. However, the case specifically where you are able to go into mikvah was because there was metal which was connecting it, and we follow the shita, the principle of Rabbi Meir. Okay, so just to pause for a moment over here, and we are continuing on with other rules of Tumah and Tahara when it comes to vessels and items. These are all really interesting laws. Perhaps you might think to yourself, but they don't really fit today. They don't really apply because we don't have the rules of Tumah and Tahara. Two things to answer to that. The first thing is, a lot of the principles and practices which we have today stem from the rules of Tumah and Tahara. Things that we discussed in the previous Amudim. Those who are doing the Daf Yomi, you will know the things such as washing your hands for hamotzi. That all comes from the takanos, the rules that were set up in the attic, which we had discussed, and also rules that we have about kashering follow the same principles as well. So these are really, really important halachas to know how they work and how they don't work when it comes to things like earthenware and metal and glass as well, which we will see as we continue on. Says the Gemara, El Me'ata, if that's really true, that when that glass is learned out from earthenware and therefore follows the same principles, Lo litamu megavon. And we would say that it does not become, a glass should not become tummy when you touch it on the outside. Remember we discussed when it comes to earthenware, it's only when you touch the inside, specifically when it has a clay keyble, when it has a center which can hold something. So when it comes to glass, if it's learned from there, it should have the same principle as well. That should only become tame from things that you are touching on the inside, not from the outside. However, that we know that's not true. Alamatan, do we not learn kli cheres or kli neter to masan shava, that when it comes to earthenware or when it comes to clay, they follow the same rules of tumah. What are these rules of tumah? Mitamim, that we say umitam me'avarehem. We say that they become impure equally. They become impure when you touch the ear, the inside, as we said, even putting your hands in the inside, mitamim me'acharehem, and you are also become impure if just another part of the cavity which is touched. And we do not become impure on the outside. And breaking them up is what enables them to become pure. And kli neter v'kli cheres hu d'mituma shava. But the Gemara we make a diak, we can make an inference. Only when it comes to clay and earthenware, there the impurities, the principles of impurity of tumah are the same. But when it comes to things other than that, i.e., glass, it doesn't follow the same rules. So therefore, for example, when you touch the outside, it would not become tummy. Other things, when you touch the outside, would become tummy, such as glass. So how are we able to say that that glass and earthenware follow the same principles? Answers the Gemara. Amri kevan dechi nishtabru yeshlam takana shabim kechlei matachos. Says the Gemara and answer. The Gemara says, no, there's a distinction. That because of the fact that when you break glass, you're able to when you break glass, you could do something about it. Once it's broken, you're able to repair it. How can you repair it? We know you're able to melt it down and to reform it. Earthenware, you can't do that. Earthenware, once it's broken, it's broken. You can't take a clay cup and reform it once it smashes. And therefore, since the inherent nature of glass is that it's able to be reformed, therefore we say that we'll allow it to be equated to metal as well. So, in conclusion to this point, we basically have glass, which is learnt out like earthenware, and we want to, because it starts off as clay or as sand, but also has elements like metal from the fact that once it's turned into glass, once it's broken, it can be reformed as well. And therefore, it has a bit of both. And this is really interesting because there's an argument between Rabbi Akiva Eiger and the Chazon Ish, which is a little bit beyond what we can discuss now. How strict are we going to take the comparisons to both of them? Rabbi Akiva Eiger, I think following Tosas, takes a little bit more of a lenient view and therefore says, well, one second, if this glass became tameh in a way that earthenware becomes tameh, let's say from the inside, then it needs to be smashed and to be broken in order for it to be purified. But if it becomes tameh from the outside, like metal does, then it can become tahar by going into the mikvah. The Chazon Ish doesn't like that. He doesn't like that leniency, and he says that really it's like earthenware and it follows the strict principles which are attached therein. Okay. So the Gemara continues on with trying to understand the learning out from earthenware that glass becomes tameh. Just in case you've tuned in a little bit later, or in case you've tuned out while you've been tuning in, remember the whole original question is, why in the world was glass decreed that it should be tameh if the Torah doesn't say that's supposed to be? And until now we've compared it because it's similar to glass. Says the Gemara, El Me'ata, that's true. Yachzu Tumasa Yishana Keklei Matechos. Just like when it comes to metal, now that we're comparing it a bit like metal, should we say that it reverts back to its state of Tumah even after you've melted it down and reformed it? Remember, when it comes to metal, you don't have the option of melting it down and reforming it. It needs to go into the mikvah. So as we learn, Kli Matechos, when it comes to metal vessels, pshutehem, if whether they're flat and mekablim or whether they have some type of holding space in them. Tameim, once it become pure, nishbaru tahora chazav also mehem kalim chazu tumasa yishana. But once you have broken them down to try to matara them, they revert back to the state of being tameh again once they've been reformed. The ilu gabe kli zechuches, when it comes to glass, so now we learn kli eights. If you have wooden either vessels, the kli or leather ones, the kli etzem made out of bone, the kli zechuches made out of glass, pshuteim tahorim, they're tahar if they are they are purified when in their flatware and their if they are just without a receptacle. Alternatively, whether if once again if they're mikabel tuma, if they have umekabel tumeim, if they have a receptacle within them. Either way, nishbru taharo. If you break them up and you purify them, chazav asamem kelam mikal tuma mikal haba mikal haba in mafreelo. They will only become tamei going forward but not retroactively. So how can you say that we are now comparing glass to metal as well, in order that they will become tamei, to follow the principles of becoming tamei and tahar? If that's the case, then they should have reverted back to being tamei once they've been reformed. But it's very clear from the Mishnah that it doesn't do such a thing. So how can you have your glass and eat it too? How can you say it's like metal on the one hand, or it's like earthenware on one hand, but not follow the principles? Answers the Gemara that there is a distinction between them. The distinction is tumas kli zechuches derabanan. It's only rabbinical. It was only rabbinically instituted. The tuma yishana derabanan, and the idea of reverting back to being tamei retroactively is also only rabbinical. So you have two rabbinical things that are coming together. B'tuma d'oraisa achse ba rabbanon. Tuma b'tuma d'rabbanon lo achse la rabbanon tuma. So the rabbis would add on rules of tuma when it comes to tuma d'oraisa, but they wouldn't add on to rules of tuma when it comes to tuma, which is d'rabbanon. So basically, the answer of why we aren't making so many insistences when it comes to glass is because only rabbinical, and therefore it's only rabbinical and only being being asked to follow a rabbinical principle of tuma. We're not going to do that to make it happen. Says the Gemara further. What about pshuteyem mihalutamu? What about when it comes to these flat vessels? Are we going to say that that it should become impure, or is it going to remain pure? Says the Gemara. When it comes to flatware, which is metal, there it is deraisa, it is biblical, and therefore it should follow the biblical principles when it comes to glass as well. So in other words, when it comes to things which are only rabbinical, then maybe you can have a leniency. But if you're comparing it to metal, in the areas where metal you have a deraisa, a biblical institution, surely it should follow when it comes to glass as well. Says the Gemara, the Gemara really should allow for this rule of when it comes to flatware. But the big problem is, if you do that, we're going to end up causing ourselves to be in a situation where we are being too strict with truma and kudshim. Remember, truma and kudshim, these are very holy things. They have to be treated with a lot of respect. And if they're going to touch glass, and then we're going to think, oh no, glass which is tamei has now made this truma, fruits and vegetables, or the fruit or kudshim, meat, become tamei as well, and then you're going to have to burn it. But you're going to burn something which is only rabbinically kudshim. That's a horrible thing to do, and therefore we have to be careful how strict we're actually going to be in order to protect the sanctity of making sure we look after truma and kudshim appropriately. We are on Tes Zayin Amud Beis now. We've reached the second Amud, and we have Rav Ashi who's giving his own position as well. Rav Ashi Omar, Rav Ashi says, really, glass is like earthenware. Why did we therefore make the decree that it would only become impure on the inside and not on the outside, like earthenware when it comes to glass? Answers the Gemara, because glass on the inside and the outside looks the same. Obviously, it's transparent. And therefore, the outside becomes the inside when it comes to how we deal with it. And therefore, really, it should be like earthenware and follow all those principles. It's just that, since it is transparent, we want to give the same rules for the outside to the inside so people shouldn't make a mistake. I think it is probably worth just pointing out over here something which might have been going through people's minds as we're discussing, and that's when it comes to weddings. We know when it comes to weddings, under a chuppah, a chassan will smash a piece of glass. And I suppose one of the questions which is asked is why glass? After all, when it comes to a vort, an engagement, there we use a plate, something which is cheres, something which is earthenware. Why under a chuppah do we use glass? And one of the reasons which we can offer based upon this Gemara is a really interesting answer. We can answer and say, well, actually, like glass, just like when it comes to glass, we only look at what's going to be going forward and not backwards. We look at that. We consider that when it's smashed, it is a new entity which can then be reformed and shaped to whatever it wants to be. So to a bride and groom, it really doesn't matter what they were or what they did before they got married. We consider the day of the chuppah as if they're reborn, reformed, and therefore they have a kaparas havonos, they have forgiveness for all their sins, as if they are starting from scratch again, just like glass would have that status as well. Just an interesting thing if you were thinking about it. And once you were thinking about things, maybe you were thinking about this as well. The consideration about when it comes to things like glass, what about when it comes to kashering? So we discussed for quite a while about Tuma and Tahara and how you can make something which does glass become impure? If it becomes impure, how do you purify it? Can glass become treif? Can glass become non-kosher based upon coming in contact with meat and then milk, pork, all those different types of things? What is the rule? Interestingly enough, since the Torah doesn't discuss anything about glass, in principle, glass cannot become non-kosher. You can't treif up glass, and this is certainly the position of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says that that glass does not need to be kosher because it is not one of the items that is able to absorb and able to become tamei. Unfortunately for Ashkenazim, the Ramah takes a different view and says that you do need to kosher glass and learns out from the Gemara, the fact that we compare it to earthenware, and just like earthenware can become treif, also and not kosher, also glass can follow the same thing. The Vilna Gaon is the one who compares it to our Gemara, which is why Sfardim, when it comes to Pesach, would have no issue using glass they use for the whole year for Pesach as well. Give it a good rinse, make sure that it's washed out and clean, but intrinsically there's no problem. There's no chametz inside glass. It just can't do it. Ashkenazim, on the other hand, we kosher. We would have to kosher our cups, and therefore, because of that, you can't really kosher a cup without causing big trouble, such as it's breaking heat. Therefore, we need to use different glasses when it comes to Pesach as well. The question is, but also another reason which is given is that we want to use different glasses when it comes to Pesach than we do the rest of the year, which is why when it comes to meat and milk, we're more lenient with glass, that we use the same glass for meat and milk, but we don't use the same glass when it comes to Pesach as we do the rest of the year. Does anyone have any comments on that specifically? on using glasses for Pesach, anything about putting things in bathtubs for long periods of time and different stuff like that you might have seen your bubbas or your parents doing before? I guess not. Okay. Yeah. So we continue.
Hello? Sorry, I was unmuted. If you've got if the Ramah's saying that we should have separate glassware for meat and milk, is that what he was saying?
Well, yeah, the Ramah says that they could become tree. They could become tree.
So, in terms of, for example, going into a pub,
yes,
and drinking in a pub, he would have a problem with that, assuming one's only stuck to spirits.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. When we say that the Ramah holds that there are issues of becoming treif, it wouldn't follow the same thing as metal or earthenware in the same type of level. It's just that the Shulchan Aruch takes a very, very lenient view and says that it's basically going to be fine. Whereas for Ashkenazim, we are choshesh, we're concerned about it. And therefore, if you're having a cold drink in a pub, it's absolutely fine. But if you're having a hot drink, then there are considerations about excuse me, there's nothing wrong with playing it safe and avoiding using a glass because of that reason. However, I did finish off by saying that we're more suspect when it comes to Pesach than we are when it comes to meat and milk during the rest of the year, where we do actually interchange. And you might get from cousins or something glasses that get washed up in the dishwasher. And really is no problem of washing glass in a meaty or milky dishwasher as long as they're cleaned afterwards.
Yeah.
Can I just come back on the hi, this is Silkert. I'm pretending to be Alex in the picture. Alex is next to me. But just to be clear, so the Ramah says that even though glass can become non-kosher for mixing in milk and meat, and also sort of Ashkenazim are a bit more suspect for Pesach.
Yes, exactly. When it comes to Pesach, the rest of the year we tend to be more makel.
Yeah, but for Pesach, I thought you just put it in a bathtub for 72 hours and have done.
Yeah, so that is an eitzah which is brought, and which is brought in order to do it. Basically, following the principles that after that period of time, because it's only rabbinical that we worry about becoming non-kosher or chametz. So therefore, you can use that form of koshering for it to be effective. When it comes to things like Pyrex or various other items, the question is whether we constitute them as glass or whether we constitute them as non-glass, and that is already a machlokas, whether they have the same rules or not. The Shevet Halevi says takes a position on and says that they would have the same issues of becoming non-kosher. The Shiram Hamatzum Bahalacha takes a different view and says that maybe the Shevet Levi says that Pyrex would follow the same rules of glass. The Shiram Hamatzum Bahalacha says it might not follow the rules of glass, it might be more strict, and therefore when it comes to Pyrex, it is a machlokas about whether you rely on it being like glass to follow those rules or not.
Sorry, it's Juliet here.
Yeah.
Did I hear you correctly? That Sephardim can just use ordinary glasses from the rest of the year or not?
Yes, as long as they're cleaned properly.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. But remember, they have to be cleaned properly. You don't want to have chametz and stuff like that on them. Just before we continue on the Gemara, aluminum, I did say I would mention. I'm sure you guys pronounce it in a much more posh way than that. Aluminium or something like that?
Indeed.
Okay, good. Oh, excellent. It's always good to be posh. It's not one of the metals which is listed in the Torah either. The Torah lists things like iron and stuff, but doesn't list aluminum. And the question is, therefore, is it metal or is it not metal? We take on that it's like that is metal, and therefore you have the same issues with koshering and stuff like that when it comes to metal dishes. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky writes somewhere that it might not be considered a metal, and therefore might be slightly more lenient. But we don't. I mean, that's quite a chiddush to say that. Plastic is the final thing which needs to be discussed. Plastic doesn't. Do you need to be total plastic when you buy things which are made of plastic? Doesn't need to go into the mikvah. We hold that plastic does not need to be tovel. That's absolutely fine. Can you kosher plastic? Can you kosher plastic? Plastic becomes. Can you put it? Can you? Is that possible? Most principles say that you can kosher plastic, and therefore, if you can put you could put it in boiling water, all that stuff. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a chiddush which says that you can't, but that's not normally how we rule. So plastic should be fine as well. Okay, we have those are some of the areas. I think we should continue on because we only have 12 minutes to go before I turn into a pumpkin. Says the Gemara as follows: Shimon ben Shatach tiking suba liisha the gazer tuma al kli matechos. Shimon ben Shatach made a few decrees. He decreed that you need to an isha, a woman, it needs to have a ridden kasuba in order to protect her. And he also made a rule which said that tuma is decreed on klei matechos on glass vessels as well. Ask the Gemara. So the Gemara says that's very nice, all well that it's that he said that it's a decree, but kli matachos daraisa. Didn't we say that? Isn't there a possibility that sorry, as I say glass, I meant metal. Shimon Shatach said that the metal is also going to be tameh. Kli matachos daraisa. What do you mean? He instituted that should be tameh. It's in the Torah. The ksiv achas hazav es hakesav. It says very clearly in the Torah that in order to purify or to make tahar metal through whether it's gold or whether it's silver. So you see, it is daraisa, it's biblical. It's not rabbinical. Says the Gemara, no. We're talking about the fact that it can revert back once you've melted it down and reformed it. Made Shasa Mishtel of Na, she made a wedding for her son, and Nibnu Kokaleha, and her utensils became Tameh. Vishivrasam, and she decided to finish it off by breaking them medicinal litzarif and putting them back into a kiln or into a smith, like a blacksmith. Rischan va'asamahem kelim chadashim, and she turned them into new vessels. Va'amr chacham yachzul l'tumasa yishana. They reverted back to its original tuma, even though in principle it didn't need to be done in that type of fashion. So that is there is where we learned that you have this rabbinical decree. My time, mishum geder mechatas naguba. Why did they institute such a thing? They instituted it that reverts back because we live in, even back then, they lived in a instant society. They lived in a society where you could just become pure by doing a quickie, by breaking something down and putting it back up. Well, that's very well and good when it comes to metal, when it comes to tumah, but when it comes to, for example, a person who becomes tummy mace, someone who becomes impure from touching a dead body, there you need the whole 3 and 7 days system of the paraduma and the sprinkling and the whole process. And if you suddenly see that you have a quick out when it comes to becoming purified, the concern is that you might think you become purified from becoming tamei mace in the same way as well, and that would be a really bad thing. And therefore, they instituted it to ensure that that metal reverts in order that you won't have a quick out, and that might lead you to think you have a quick process when it comes to tumas mace as well. Says the Gemara, Hanichel mand amar lo l'chol tumas amru el tumas mace lovad amru shaper el mand amar l'chol tumas amru ma'ikla neimar. 1 second. That would work if you are only comparing it, if you're comparing it only to things like the tumah mace. But if you also compared it to all types of tumah, where we follow the same types of principles, then how are we going to say that that it follows suit? Because you don't only when it comes to tumas mace do you have such a worry. not when it comes to all tumas that you would have such a principle. So Abai gives another answer and says the reason why we let it revert back is because what happens if you don't actually do a good job of breaking it down? You just poke a hole in there or something like that, where it really is a functioning kli, and you just want to go through the motions, as it were, which hasn't really broken the thing down, and then you repair it very quickly and say, oh look, it's all refixed. But actually, that's just trying to do a fudge. And as a result of that, we say that it's going to revert back to avoid anyone making that mistake. Rava Omar, Rava gives a different reason. You might, the Rava gives another reason. The reason why it reverts back is because you might think that just toveling something is enough, but we know it's not enough. When it comes, for example, a woman going to a mikvah, if a woman goes to mikvah, it's on the seventh day, going into the eighth day of the tevilah process, we know that you have to wait for nightfall as well, because until nightfall, even if you went to the mikvah early, even though if you could say that mikvah yom kekulam, and therefore a woman could go to the mikvah on the final day of the tahar process, she would still have to wait for nightfall for it to become tahar, and therefore, if we allow you to have for once you shape something and instantaneously it can become fixed, you might therefore a woman or anyone who's tameh might not wait for harav shemesh for the sun to set before you become tahar. Says the Gemara, my benai, why do you need? What's there in the bayim Rabba? What happens if you really smash the thing down really, really well? It'd be very hard for Rava to say that's going to be a problem. It's going to be really hard for Abai to say it's really going to be a problem. But according to Rava, it would still be an issue. So according to both of them, we institute this Tumah Yishana that reverts back to its state of Tumah. Says the Gemara onwards. 2 dots. The Gemara says, V'idach maihi. The Gemara asks the question, what else were they, what other rules did they institute, did they create on that day? So another one, this has to do with Mayim Shovim, with whether the fact that we need to have rainwater for a mikvah and not rely on water which is drawn from, let's say, a tap or something like that. Jisman, as we learned in the Mishnah, if you place a cup or something like that underneath a pipe, the kabla handmade shamim, in order that you're able to get water from it, and the pipe becomes something which is instituted as to draw water. Whether it's small vessels or whether it's large vessels, whether it's stone, clay adama, or earth, clay galolim, or made of dung. Either way, the mikvah becomes impure to be used because it's mayim shovim, drawn water. A mikvah needs to have 40 saw, or mem saw, of a certain amount of water, which is rainwater. Afterwards, you can then use a tap water. But if you don't have that principal amount, which is in there, it's not going to work. And therefore, that was another thing which was discussed. And the Gemara has a machlokes in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about this specific point. Says the Gemara, Echad hamaniach ve'echad hashochet divrei Beis Shammai. Whether you left the vessel there or whether it was forgotten there, Beis Shammai says it's problematic. Beis Hillel and Beis Hillel says it's going to be tahar b'shocheach if forgotten. Only if you put it there intentionally, are you trying to turn this into mayim shovim, drawn water, which would be a problem. Says the Gemara onward. The Gemara says, Ubeis Hillel matarim, Ubeis Hillel, right? Amar Meir nimdu v'rabu. They counted and they established Beis Shammai Beis Hillel that there were more Beis Shammai over Beis Hillel, but Beis Shammai b'shocheach. That so, in other words, Beis Shammai is in the right, but Beis Shammai agreed to Beis Hillel when it comes to if it's forgotten b'chatzer sheotar, if it's forgotten in a courtyard, which clearly could be accidental and not intentional, and it would be okay. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi told us as follows. Adai machlokas b'makom avendas, the machlokas still stands between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Amri b'sharsha debei Rav. Amri hakol modim v'shendicha b'shas kishar avim tmeim. Everyone agrees that if you left it there when it's a very cloudy day, expecting rain, it's going to be tomei, because we really know what your mindset is. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel both know that you're leaving it there in order that you can go and gather water because you want to drink. B'shas pizar avim, if it's a sunny day, everyone agrees it's fine. Beis Hillel matar, they're called tarim. When they argue, El Shenicha b'shas kisher avim nispazeru. only where it had started off being cloudy and then got sunny because it was true and then became cloudy again. Marsav Batla Machshavta, one says that one would hold that even the original intent might have been to gather water, now that it became sunny and that you forgot about that. Marsav Batla Machshava doesn't ruin your original mindset, and it's still going to become problematic. Says the Gemara, we're almost done at the end. Or Rabbi Yossi, the Om Machlokas Daim Kol Medas, or Rabbi Yossi says that the argument still stands between Beisham and Beis Hillel. He doesn't say that they changed their mind. We didn't change their mind. So what would be the final Machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Says the Gemara, Batshulahu, we're missing in the 18. Rav Nachman Yitzchak, Af Benos Kusim Nidos Merosam Bo Bayom Gazru. The final 18th gezerah that they put in place was that even though normally when it comes to a woman, only when she reaches puberty is she able to have nidos and to have that type of impurity. When it comes to the benos kusim, they made a decree that from the time that they were already in their cribs, when they were already babies, bayom gazru, already they had decreed that they already are able to be tamei. So we've reached the end of Tez Zayin on the days. We've done the daf for today, and I'm going to stop sharing this and come back in so you can see my face very briefly. So, as you can see, that was quite a daf that we were encountering. Some of the dafim are a little bit more intensified than others. The good news is we have until next week until we're going to do the next daf HaShavua. But we do have a further schedule of 7:30 to 8:30 shurim every night of the week. Unbelievable! It probably boggles the mind, the capability and of that we're able to learn and to enjoy together. So just wanted to give you a little bit of a preview of what's coming up next that we're able to tune into for the next couple of weeks as well, so you can spread the word, so you can avoid Zoom, whatever the case might be, depending on your proclivity of learning. So tomorrow night is going to be How Do You Jew It, which is practicing Jewish law and practice. These are halachas that we're going to be dealing with as Pesach is coming, to try to get some mastery over Pesach and how it's done practically. Tuesday night is going to be Mishnah share. Wednesday is going to be the Parsha share, and then Thursday is going to be contemporary, interesting halachic discussions as well. Any comments from anyone here at the moment from our hour-long session?
Shkoch Rabbi, may I ask, have you mentioned in previous shirim the difference between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel?
Yeah, it comes up quite a lot, especially in Beit Sa. What's interesting is that there's Shammai and Hillel, and there's Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Shammai and Hillel were contemporaries, and they were students of Shammai and Talyon, and they had an amazing learning. They really didn't argue on many things. The Chavas Yair says, when it comes to Shammai and Hillel, because they learned together, the only things that they would have argued about is things that didn't have a Masorah on, a tradition of things that were happening on a regular basis. Only things such as things that you didn't encounter most days did they have a different tradition on. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the yeshivas of Shammai and Hillel, which continued on their teachings, they argued like mad. They already, the institutions couldn't get on with one another in terms of halachic psak. Shammai and Hillel, on the other hand, had different approaches to things, but there was less that they would have disagreed on. I'm always happy to field questions and stuff like that as well. Tomorrow morning, 7:15 a.m. will be our Shacharit Live, which is a great way to start the day. It would be even better if someone wakes me up for it, which would be quite helpful. I'll leave that to Richard to handle. I'm sure we'll be more than happy to. Rabbi Nick, any last words?
No.
Okay, this has been day one of Be Online. As far as I'm, this chat will stay open, and just be aware that if you're having a conversation on it, you might only see yourselves, but the whole community are capable of listening in at any given time. So tread it carefully. I wish everyone a be gesund. To
Rabbi?
be well. Yes.
Did we discuss whether people want to stick with this time, whether it works, whether people want it more regularly than once a week?
We didn't. Any comments on the 7:30 slot for evening shirim?
On a Sunday night, yes, it's fine.
What about other nights of the week?
Yeah,
Bit
sure.
early.
Hopefully going to be working from home, so that'll be
8 o'clock would probably work better.
While you the thing is, Jacqueline's going to be doing the Pesach perspectives from 6:30 to 7. So people might want a chance to scarf down some food, unlike Jeff, who was happy to eat during the Daf Yomi share.
I did switch my video off though.
And therefore, 7:30 would be about, well, basically, what Rabbi Nick was saying is that people, especially if you're home all day, you might be tired at night, and doing something a little bit later than 8:30, people might want to veg out a little bit and not do too much Tahara discussions. What do you think?
Just to ask, tomorrow night, Cedric and I are with Rabbi Dweck at LSJS online.
Yeah.
Could we record? Can we see what's going to happen?
Oh, Rabbi Nick, I forgot to record tonight. Sorry.
Don't worry, I did it.
Everything's going to record.
I'm actually going to turn off the recording now, though.
It is recorded.
Everything's recorded and goes onto YouTube.
Because that'd be